Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LCS. As we head into our postseason matches, it is impossible for us to ignore the rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Our hearts go out to the families of the victims targeted last week in Georgia and all people who have lost their lives or have been harmed due to hate crimes and discrimination. The LCS stands with the Asian American community and all disenfranchised and marginalized communities that have experienced racism, hate, and discrimination. We encourage everyone to continue educating themselves on these issues and to support any of the organizations dedicated to breaking down racial barriers, if you are able. For a place to start, visit the link on your screen to learn more about how you can get involved in this movement. Check in on your friends and loved ones in the AAPI community, continue to educate yourself, and speak out against hatred and discrimination. Take care of yourself and be good to each other.
I looked in the mirror, I'm different. I finally made a decision. They're not brave like you. They're too scared to do anything is different.
That's a massive manifest.
EG played their style, and damn do they look good.
Dignitas is here to play. Dardock with the 1v5 Baron stealing at TSM. 2021 has been the year of Dig. And now Sunday finds the angle. What a knock up there.
100 Thieves looking like they have renewed focus.
And Alfari guarantees the win here for Team Liquid.
From Lane Kingdom to Summoner's Rift domination. Triple kill already for Lost. He wants the fourth. It's going to be no problem. They're going to give the Penta. Change his name. It's TSM Wondered. Can he get in the way? The flag's going to block it. That was beautiful by Blather, and he does it again.
And they will get first place in the spring split.
This is the Mid-Season Showdown.
Take it!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new LCS studios and to the Mid-Season Showdown. Man, does it feel good to be back in this space, and albeit all by myself for just right now. As we are taking COVID and the quarantine situation very seriously, we will make our best efforts to get everyone into the studio as quickly as possible, but only when we can safely do so. So for now, here I am joined on the big analyst wall by three of my favorites. It's Crumbs right here to my right side, Emily in the mid lane, and Raz for the very first time fresh out of Visa Purgatory, my friend. How you doing?
I'm free! It's good to be here, my friend. It is great to be on the show in a Zordon-esque appearance, I guess, for now.
Yeah, all of y'all are dwarfing me like crazy in this situation. But I'm glad. Hey, you know what? If I got to look up to anybody, yeah, looking up to you three is definitely a good way to kick it off. Well, Raz, we are more than happy to have you. I will say, if anything good came out of the quarantine and the Visa Purgatory scenario, it was the social media gold that you ended up coming up with throughout the course of this entire spring split.
Yeah.
But for those of you at home, you might be aware.
Yeah.
You might be aware of the fact that Raz, well, he's missed 6 weeks of spring action here on the desk. And so we thought it was only fair to have a little bit of catching up to do, and who better to do it but the man himself. Raz, let's take a look at your spring split, oversimplified.
I may not have been on broadcast, but as I sat alone in Visa Purgatory, I had an abundance of time to reflect, dance, cry, and watch a lot of LCS. So for those who need a quick recap, here's my take on LCS Spring Split oversimplified. Lock-in champions Team Liquid were the team to beat coming into spring.
The winners of your first ever LCS lock-in.
Unfortunately, they stumbled off the trophy podium, dropped the spaghetti in their matches against Immortals.
Immortals take down Team Liquid.
TSM,
They're gonna find the kills, they're gonna find the game.
and 100 Thieves.
That out in 100 Thieves will advance and stay in first place, knocking down Team Liquid.
But TL stabilized
That is gonna be the ace and the game for Team Liquid.
and is looking rock solid going into playoffs. Meanwhile, the retirement of Bjergsen and Doublelift left a deep void in TSM. After a disappointing early start,
And the KDAs keep plummeting on TSM.
team chemistry solidified,
They're gonna give them the Penta.
and the TSM glow-up has led them to a second-place finish in the standings. If this doesn't put a smile on your face, I don't know what will. 3 things were certain this spring: death, taxes, and CLG getting first blood. Broxa's and Pro Belter's eventual return was not enough to boost CLG into playoffs. Immortals didn't live up to their name. FlyQuest wasn't quite the bee's knees, and Golden Guardians is still developing. Team Dignitas defied expectations, including my own. They went from a preseason afterthought to front of mind this postseason. They went from throwing to catching, picking up some unbelievable wins.
GG, well played. Dignitas takes down TSM.
Cloud9 continued their tradition of dominating early and often in spring, and now they sit at the top, #1. The question is, will they continue on with their other great tradition of the inevitable end? I'm running out of time, so for 100 Thieves and Evil Geniuses, I'll leave you with this. DeMonte had the best post-game reactions of all time, and Impact is the weak side king. You can push him and push him and push him, but you can never keep him down. And I think that's it, at least as far as I'm concerned, in Spring Split oversimplified.
All right, well, that was a chef's kiss of an oversimplified right there, if I do say so myself, friend. Thank you for that. That's a perfect
Who's out there
recap.
collecting these videos?
Great line.
Everything that
What's
shows,
happening?
you have to know if it's on the internet, it's going to be saved in perpetuity, my friend, and we thank you for all of that content gold. But while Raz missed out
All right.
on some of the player of the game votes that you see right behind of us, the rest of us, of course, did not. Blabber up there topping the tables when it comes to player of the game. Those will, of course, feed into the ultimate MVP, Honda MVP discussion. But with the conclusion of our regular season this spring, we have summoned powers that be to vote on the top players across all of our roles. It's time now to take a look at our All-Pro team, starting from the bottom towards the top. Our third All-Pro team is going to be Huni up there in the top lane, Dardoch in the jungle, followed up by Jensen, Neo, and Swordart, rounding it out. If we move ourselves along to the second All-Pro team, we will find Impact, Santorin, Power of Evil, FBI, and Vulcan. But not to be outdone, of course, is our first All-Pro team, and that consists of Alfari, Blabber, Perks, Sven, and Core JJ. So here's now where I return to the three of you. Just generally, Emily, I'll come to you first. How did you feel about the way that the All-Pro voting shook out?
Support was so difficult. I think of all the positions, I personally had the most trouble with support. I do think it makes sense that Core made it into the first All-Pro team, and I'm actually kind of surprised at how much the community has generally disagreed with that. I think he does a lot for TL. We're going to talk about it later, so I won't talk about it too much here, but that was the big thing that stood out to me, was just how difficult. There were like 4 different supports. I feel like you could all make really good arguments for being on that first All-Pro team.
Yeah, I would agree. I think support's pretty stacked in the league right now with Huhi, Swordart. In my mind, I had Vulcan as #1. I think Cloud9 just had phenomenal players on that roster, so it's really hard to make a judgment call. For me, the biggest surprising factor was Neo. I had Neo as a third place in terms of like his role as an AD carry. A lot of people agreed with that. I didn't expect it. It was a major reason of why Dignitas really thrived this split. I would have expected, tactical and lost. They were spotty performances from both, and Neo was able to come in his rookie split and dominate.
Well, Crumbs, what about you?
And on the third place team, you got Huni. Sorry to cut you off, but I got to talk about Huni because when the season began, everyone was like, I can't believe Huni's going to TSM. He had a terrible split in the academy. Well, Huni haters, go back to your cave because he is killing it in the top lane. And Alfari is unanimously the best top laner in the league. And he is saying that Huni is also a really good top laner. So I think the Huni narrative that he's a bad or is just running it down is already dead. He is a solid world-class top laner.
Well, already looking forward to today's series where we're going to see both of those top laners going up against each other in a best-of-5 scenario. Excited beyond belief for that. But before we dive into today's series, we have to continue this discussion around postseason awards with, of course, the greatest of the individual awards, the Honda MVP. And so back over to you, Raz. We got to talk about the man first. He's atop the POG leaderboards. He's been front of the conversation the entire split. It's Blabber.
Yeah, spring split to spring split domination for Blabber. His early pressure, as you can already see off his Rek'Sai play in both mid and bot lane, were hard to dismiss. For me, how he was able to work with his top lane really solidified this for me. I think Blabber as just someone that you have to constantly be aware of. The stats make it very clear that Cloud9 play for the jungle. They allow him great timings to gank, and then they also allow him to contest and invades. And then when he gets those resources, he just does not give it up. It's hard to disagree with Blabber as number one.
I agree, and I think while C9 do play around him really well, one thing that's improved from last year to this year for me visibly is his communication with his lanes. I think is actually a lot better, and additionally, his early pathing is a lot more thoughtful than it was previously. I think before he was a lot more reliant overall on C9 to do a lot of things for him. And while I still think that like Perks gets a lot more done than people may not like realize or notice because it might not be as flashy, Blabber in general has stepped up in both of those areas in a really impressive way for me from his split last year.
Well, so Blabber has been that most talked about name, but Crumbs, the name closest in conversation or competition throughout the split has, of course, been the top laner for Team Liquid, Alfari.
That's right. He was in the last place LEC team last year, comes here to the LCS, has an incredible split. Statistics-wise, he's far above the competition. He's getting so many solo kills. He's crushing games. But the thing is, he's not doing it all on his own. All of Team Liquid is actually playing around him to give him a ton of resources. Santorin and Corey JJ are constantly up there, but what he does with the advantages, no one else in the league is doing. He does so much work for his team. This was a game against Cloud9 where his solo kills on the sidelines just flat out won them the game. So the amount of effort that Team Liquid puts into getting him ahead is always rewarded, and that consistency, being able to take those advantages from lane to the Nexus, is something that no one else is doing, and that's why Alfari is number one.
Yeah, and the one thing I hated about the preseason conversations was that conversation with Alfari being on the last place team, right? Even on this split, on that split in the LEC, he was voted as an all-pro LEC top laner. He was still respected as having incredible laning phase, how he was able to transition that. For sure, it didn't work out for that team. At the end of the day, he was a diamond in the rough. He was still insanely consistent, bringing that over to Team Liquid. Alfari has to be in that conversation easily.
One final person to talk about it is perhaps a person who sits just on the outside of the conversation overall, but I'm curious your take, Emily, on the TL jungler in Santorin.
So yeah, I wanted to bring up Santorin as an MVP candidate, despite the fact that I myself did not vote him first All-Pro team. I put Blabber instead. I think Santorin does so much for this Team Liquid team. And when we talk about how strong their early game is, it all starts with Santorin. His early pathing, he's excelled in this meta. He gets them ahead really, really well. He's very thoughtful. And I would say that he's underrated, but then I realized he's second on POG leaderboard. So apparently apparently we're recognizing him, but I think generally in the community, maybe he's not as flashy as Blabber, and Blabber has had obviously a phenomenal split, but Santorin does so much for this team. I did want to throw him into the conversation, despite the fact that I did not vote him MVP.
I mean, I think you hit it exactly. So Blabber is just more flashy, right? When Blabber gets ahead, he's getting triple kills on Olaf. He's flashing over walls. He's doing all sorts of crazy things. When Santorin gets ahead, he's taking advantage of pathing. He's taking your camps, and there's no opportunity to fight him back. So it's so much harder to see what Santorin is doing as opposed to Blabber, who is constantly in your kill feed.
Well, with the majority of our regular split discussion now behind us, today, of course, marks the beginning of the Mid-Season Showdown. And so who better to go to than Riv for a Mid-Season Showdown explainer? Take it away.
This weekend marks the start of the LCS Mid-Season Showdown, our competitive capstone to the first half of the LCS season. For veteran watchers, the Mid-Season Showdown is an updated version of spring playoffs from previous years. While teams' regular season records persist across spring and summer, the Mid-Season Showdown counts as its own full LCS title, as well as qualifying the winning team to be NA's representative to the Mid-Season Invitational in Reykjavik, Iceland in May. Mid-Season Showdown is a double elimination tournament. The 6 teams with the best regular season records will qualify. The first 4 seeds make up the upper bracket, while the 5th and 6th seeds will start in the lower bracket. If a team is defeated in the upper bracket, they still have a chance to make it to finals by winning all of their matches in the lower bracket. But any loss there will knock the team out of the tournament. This culminates in finals weekend, where the top 3 teams will duke it out to determine who will take NA and be our representative to MSI in May. On Saturday, April 10th, the 2nd and 3rd place teams will face off, with the winner taking on the 1st place team the next day, Sunday, April 11th.
Thank you very much, Riv, and thank you all at home here for tuning in today, the first day of the Mid-Season Showdown. I'm jealous of Dash getting to be back in that new badass set. Kobe and I are still here, trapped in his glass case of emotions, also known as our remote broadcast boxes. One day, buddy. One day, we're getting out of these, but today we're still here, and we are hyped heading into this series between TSM and TL.
We certainly are. These two teams are no stranger to playoffs, Captain Flowers. Both of them have quite a bit of experience throughout the organization's histories within playoffs. Historically, TSM have been ahead with more overall appearances and victories than Team Liquid, both in the individual matchup as well as overall. And I believe we have a graphic to bring up to show you guys the statistics here for these two teams. But I can say in the head-to-head, it's extremely close, actually. 8-2-6 in individual games, whereas the appearances, even though it has skyrocketed for Team Liquid since franchising, TSM have the history there, pre-franchising, Team Liquid was not making these appearances. It's a brand new story now. And this season has also been another new story. It's really interesting how TSM and Team Liquid have had completely opposite play styles within the spring split and even in lock-in. TSM, they struggled in the early game. They accrued frequent deficits, but were still able to rally in the mid and late game, with big comeback victories, some of the shot calling finally coming together for them. We actually had Power of Evil on several interviews and on TSM Legends talking about the communication within the team being one of these big reasons, of all the confusion that you saw in some of the TSM early games. But meanwhile, if you match up versus Team Liquid, look at these numbers. The numbers don't lie. They have smashed in the early game. Alfaria Beast on the top side. Core JJ and Tactical actually, especially early in the split, were a big part of that as well. But the late game has been what plagued TSM, or Team Liquid, and what led to TSM taking 2-0 victories over Team Liquid in the spring split, leading into this matchup. So even though they end with tied scores at the end of spring split, TSM have the tiebreaker 2-0 head-to-head.
I'm so excited for this. Like, you bringing up the numbers about how many appearances, how many best of fives and everything these two teams have. These are the 2 teams in the LCS with the most trophies of anybody, of all time, and we get to have them as our first best of 5 here in the playoffs, and that is just phenomenal. We're here for an absolute banger. I hope it's a full 5 games here in the upper bracket, but first, we need to pay our respects to the teams that could not be here for our mid-season showdown. So on that note, as we step away, we want to say RIP to some real ones.
Standing on the edge, I see.
In order to be able to take risks and learn, you need to be on more aggressive picks. Really help you learn on like testing your limits.
Just about ready here. Niles doesn't even care. Look at Niles, constantly flashing the thumbs up, just taking a shower underneath the turret shots.
And then this one game where we fail massively in the early game, it's the one we're winning. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me anymore.
The faithful have been rewarded.
Turtles always win, that's what they say, right?
Risk giving over that soul point where then one mistake. Oh, nice play here.
Forces the flash, set over the top though.
It's been tough, but also really nice, I think. Like, I don't want to like lie and be like, it's all been sunshine and rainbows.
Even if they tell me that it's make believe.
We're on one of those camps. Ult comes in, second one as well. Revenge really going for this one. Forrest to burn the ulti, but he's gonna get dove! And Revenge! First blood Alfari in a 1v1!
The world is gonna know my name.
LCS Countdown and the Mid-Season Showdown. As we do move into the postseason picture, I thought it wise that we take another look at the patch. All of our pros will be playing on 11.5. I'm particularly interested in the meta when it comes to the champions themselves. So Crumbs, over to you first. Now that we are moving into the playoff picture, what are you looking at?
When playoffs happen, Dash, it is always about globals. These champions always surface, the Shens and the Twisted Fates. Now, Shen is going to be highly relevant because TSM has already played 3 games of it, and one of those was a win against Team Liquid. Twisted Fate has a ton of priority around the world, a great strategy. Now, the mid laners here don't necessarily play them, but it will be a good strategy to surprise your opponent, play to the sidelines. The new ones, the Karma, this champion continues to get buffed for no apparent reason. She is crazy busted, a 3-way flex, works really well with the hyper carries that are popping up with the Tristana and the Jinx. And speaking of hyper carries, who better to delete them than Malphite? You already have Sion in the top lane as a great tank. Malphite is the next one. He's going to be able to instantly delete them, and if you try to even peel for them with a Thresh, good luck. Malphite gets rid of them like that.
Crumbs, I'm glad you brought up globals because looking at what other leagues have used on 11.5 as opposed to LCS, there are 2 picks that I would love to see. The first is Nocturne. It's a flex. Here you're going to see Doinby playing it because, of course, Doinby plays mid Nocturne, but Nocturne can be flexed across multiple different roles. If you just want to hear the glory of Nocturne, go hit up Vedius on Twitter from LEC. We also have the Karthus jungle, which I also really like. Obviously, there's still the clear speed plus the global ultimate, and the 2 work super well together. As you can see here, Schalke played them last week, I believe, together. These are 2 picks that I would please love to see out of LCS teams. Maybe.
All right,
because I really like him.
look,
Brad's is already shaking his head.
pretty-
He's like, no chance.
The pretty please is
I
out
don't
there.
Definitely don't ask Vedius if you want to win.
No. But here's the thing. Vedius has got to be at home watching right now. And if
Get outta here,
if he is, Emily just made him the happiest man. But now he's got to stay awake for the whole duration of this best of 5 just to see if Nocturne does get played. But Raz, let's focus in on one lane specifically when it comes to champions. And the lane I want to focus on is the mid lane, because that was the one position rather that at the tail end of the LCS split, we saw a fair amount of experimentation with things like the Ahri and the Veigar coming out. What is your take on the mid lane meta?
Yeah, 11.14 was very large. It was a large patch. It took time for players to really understand, abuse it. So champions that are in front of me, like the Ahri, the Veigar, these are some picks that we've seen actually specifically from Jensen, but also from Humanoid in the LEC, specifically the Ahri. Silas, we've seen seldom. It is a great counter pick. Cassidum, I'm expecting a little bit more in specific counter pick situations because of the items underneath you. Like the items that did get changed gradually, you know, Ionian Boots of Lucidity coming into the fray, certain things like ability haste becoming more and more prevalent. It was Everfrost that got buffed. Cosmic Drive got a huge buff, by the way, from 30 to 40 ability haste if you hit that easy 160 AP threshold. And so now you come into a situation where you have, if you include Zhonya's, 90 ability haste, barring Transcendence and Rune stats, which if you cast your mind back to last season is around like 47% CDR. You're easily now breaking the CDR box. It's
Awful.
ridiculous. So even just so people know what that looks like, the Foxfire, the W from Ahri, can go as low as 2 seconds for cooldown. So you can just spam the 40% movement speed. It's insane. Like
It's Earth mode.
event horizon from Veigar can go into 5 seconds.
Basically.
Exactly. So it really is pushing some champions into the fray.
Well, I think what's ridiculous about it too, Raz, as you mentioned, by showing the actual items themselves, is it's faster to get to that point as well. Most of the time, people weren't hitting that 40 to 45% number until the 5th, maybe 6th item, but you can get it with just the boots +3. I mean, that's absolutely absurd. And so, I mean, myself as well, I've been having fun just in normal games experimenting with different champions. How low can I get those cooldowns? How much spamming can I do? Maybe we'll see a little bit of it today. But now it is time to refocus our attention towards the series at hand. It's TSM, it's Team Liquid, and they're going at it in a best-of-5. Back on the wall behind me is what you at home had to say about this matchup. That's right, we went to the fans on Twitter to get ourselves a report card as a jumping-off point to talk about these two teams. So we're going to dive right in and hit each of these categories beat by beat. We're starting in the drafting phase. And Raz, the community is quite split on this one. TL only getting just barely a majority at 51%. Do you agree, disagree? Where are you at?
I agree. I think they are far more flexible in the mid lane in what they can pick. So I'm expecting the ability to be able to move throughout a best-of-5, where TSM a little bit more constricted, but I do like their drafts recently.
Okay, all right. So the drafting, a small edge towards Team Liquid, but honestly, a very, very even approach for both these teams. So let's dive into the moment that the champions hit the Rift, Emily, the early game. Again, the fans at home have given it to Team Liquid, but in a much greater spread this time, near 70%.
Yeah, and that's not surprising. TL's early game is just absolutely insane. They get so much priority from their laners. I already talked about how much Santorin does for this team early, especially in the jungle meta that we've had. And, you know, one thing that we didn't touch upon, but I'm going to touch upon really quickly, is Core JJ. I think he's been actually a really, really strong component of why their early game has been so good. His early roams, him and Santorin putting everyone ahead. Alfari gets a ton of advantages on the top side by himself. It's been the transitioning through the mid game that they've had some issues with, and that's where I think signs favor TSM.
And especially the late game as well, because you remember that terrible early game against Cloud9. They're able to come back, but also against Team Liquid. This was actually week 4 where Team Liquid is ahead the whole time, but Tactical gets caught a few times. TSM makes some good late game calls, and they suddenly win. This has happened already twice. So with TSM can always come out closing the game stronger, that's going to push you in an advantageous position in a best of series. Even getting the Baron steals together. This is something that Team Liquid have to watch out for. They need to clean up their late game, or else TSM will punish again like they've already done 2 times in the regular season.
Yeah, and you pointed out Baron. TSM's Baron control is absolutely insane. It is 76%. They are significantly ahead of everyone else in the league. I think their counter objective control setup is typically very good too, as in someone else sets up around an objective and they're able to come in and kind of counter that. You can also blame that on whatever team is setting up for the objective. Maybe they've had some issues setting up for it. But I do think TSM react and respond well typically to a lot of objective setups that teams have and are usually able to turn them to their advantage.
All right, so that takes us through both the late game as well as play styles to a degree. And so now, Raz, it's time for us to focus in on a couple specific matchups. We're going to take a look at 2, but we're going to start in the mid lane. So continuing that conversation, PoE, Jensen, the community says PoE's got the edge. Do you agree?
Yeah. I don't agree. I think PoE is definitely looking incredibly good by the end of it. But community, I think if we looked at the early laning stats for Jensen, pops out at you, because Jensen, even in bad matchups, has overperformed in those. Early laning phase, I would give it to Jensen. He just is put in those positions where he has to, you know, give a lot for the team composition to work. So I would actually favor Jensen. The power of evil is right there with him. What am I hearing there, Crumbs? What do you not agree with, sir?
I don't agree with anything you said, Raz. None of it. I think the mid lane is all PoE. I think the fact that PoE's champion pool is smaller is never a weakness. We've always cited that it's not a weakness, it's a strength. He's doubling down on what works. Jensen has spread himself too thin, and PoE, with the addition of Bjergsen, I think has become the best mid laner in the league. You can see it in his play. He's so much more aggressive. On top of having Bjergsen behind him, they also have Curry, the mid laner, the coach from FlyQuest that took them to the finals. I think PoE all the way for mid.
I love it. We have found the first significant point of contention on the desk for the day, and that means there will be plenty of spice to follow. But there is one final matchup that we must talk about, and that's the supports. Again, Emily, you talked about the fact that it was the toughest of the categories to vote in when it came to the All-Pro voting, and we had two of the big contenders in that voting here today on stage. It's Sword Art, it's Core JJ.
Yeah, and I mean, both of these, the thing that stands out to me is the duo procs, actually. You'd expect, given what people think of Cord, that his duo procs would be actually higher than Sword Art's. But again, that just points to how much he roams and ends up helping out TL. I think it's actually kind of an underrated part of his gameplay right now.
Raz, what's your take on the support situation?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the split, I dreamed of this matchup when I hear Sword Art is coming to the LCS, that we're going to be seeing him go up against Core JJ. I think Sword Art has looked incredibly good in the last 3 games. In the last few weeks, he's been spot on. I would favor Core JJ still. I think he's at the right places at the right times. If there's a dive top lane, he is there to make it a 3-man play. So I would edge it to Core JJ.
All right, cool. From here, Crumbs, I do want to come back to you on the mid lane conversation, because it just occurred to me, it was just brought up to me, that we missed a very important and integral part of your argument for as to why PoE is the favored mid laner in the matchup. Let's get to it now.
The joining of the minds, the best mid laner that we've had in the LCS combined and entering the mind of PoE.
What
This is a match made in heaven. When I heard this lineup happening, I knew this would be a great match. I am so excited to see them play in the playoffs. Look at that. This is just beautiful.
Well, you know, Raz, I wanted to say that I was convinced by all of your brilliant arguments, and then Crumbs had to come in with this one here right at the end, and I feel like I'm now on the PoE train.
Who's working with him behind the scenes for this stuff?
I know.
Look, it's the same power of evil, right? He's looking good, but we ain't giving him that much credit.
I think it just materialized. I think that is actually what happened when the meetings of the minds occurred. All right, we're just about ready for the teams to hit the rift, but as we are moving into the best of 5s in the playoff scenario, I want to get the 3 of you on record for the first time here in playoffs with this best of 5, TSM and Team Liquid. Who's going to take it, and in how many games? We'll start with you, Raz, on the far end.
I'll have to go Team Liquid 3-1. I was battling with this one. I think TSM are a strong team-fighting squad, but Team Liquid is a team that gets on the objective first, has great control, and I think when it comes to playoff time that they will, not receive that control.
All right, well, these are teams next to each other in the regular season standings, so Emily, I expect it to be a contentious one, but do you?
I expect the series to be really close. I actually went 3-2. I think it's actually highly probable it's going to be one of these teams and C9 in the finals. But yeah, I think the thing I'm looking at is based on their previous matchups, that early game versus TSM's strong mid-game macro and late-game team fighting. It's a really interesting matchup because of that. And yeah, I think it's going to be close, but I think TL are going to edge it out.
All right, Crumbs, is the PoE Bjerg duo enough to sway the tides here in TSM's favor?
Make it a sweep.
It was. It was. This was not a hard choice for me. TSM 3-1. Not only have they 2-0'd them already in the regular season, but because Alfari is not going to be able to get the same advantages against Huni, Team Liquid is not going to be able to find the individual outplays that they have needed to win games. That's why I think TSM, because they can hold down the top lane and have been better as a team in the late game, will come out ahead. 3-1.
Well, there it is. The predictions are there. The stage is set. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to hand it back over to Kobe and Flowers to kick off the Mid-Season Showdown.